excited to share part of a beautiful day with us here. And with no further ado, because I am cognizant of the limitation of time we have, we'll start with Avia giving us, I suppose, an overview of the teachings and whatever else she has to say. So let us not pause for another moment. Avia?
I was trying to think about what to talk about and what to share. If I understand in a long relationship with God has to do all this, you have to be contributory to the relationship. So I'm thinking, what is it I can give? What can I share back? Well, I haven't honed my skills of writing and speaking. I haven't had the need in probably the past 20 years. I probably put so much energy in love relationships. And I thought, well, maybe I should talk about that and how I'm evolving in love, how I'm trying to work towards the inner peace of love, and maybe share with you some of the teachers and the literature I've read that helped me to grow in that aspect. And one of my favorite people to read was Susan Taylor. I'm sure most of the women are very familiar with her. She's helped me a lot on the path, and one day I hope to be like her, be able to express myself like her. And there was one chapter in particular that really grabbed me, and I thought I would share that with you. And it's called You Are Love. So if you don't mind, I'll read that to you. Okay. You are love. Love is our strongest human need. In our effort to satisfy our deepest craving, we regularly look outside ourselves to find a person to love. Don't you love being in love? I know I do. I've invested more time and energy in love relationships than I have in most other things. But a relationship with another person will never satisfy our hunger for love. You can build a life with another person. You can share heart to heart. But making someone other than yourself responsible for your personal fulfillment places an unfair burden on a person. It assigns a task to someone else that is yours alone. We never feel content if our happiness depends on someone else's behavior. Expecting another person to get inside our head and to meet our various unspoken needs encourages us to be manipulative and sets us up for certain dissatisfaction and disappointment. Do you know yourself? Do you know the difference between your needs and the things your ego demands to master your fears and insecurities? It takes much soul searching to discover what is true for you, what in life is important, what your own values are as opposed to those imposed upon you or those you've adopted out of convention. Looking to our relationships for our love is like looking outside of ourselves for a lifeline. It's also putting the cart before the horse. Until we discover love within ourselves, we can't authentically share it with anyone else. We confuse the rush of romance for love and give it more weight than it deserves. We give great importance to the symbols that Hollywood has assigned to love: good looks, great sex, an air of success, and certain refinements. We are all attracted by them. We're often entrapped by them. But these are gorgeous accessories, not the basis for building a solid, lasting relationship. They have no connection to love because they don't sustain us or satisfy us over time. Love is everlasting. Love is the activity of life, the active power in all creation, present everywhere in every moment in exactly the same degree. We are sustained by love and couldn't separate ourselves from it even if we tried. Love binds us to God, to one another, yet allows us individuality at the same time. A loving relationship is a delicious thing, but it's not where love begins. A romantic relationship provides us with an opportunity to express love, but with or without a relationship, love exists in us and as us. Love. We think about it, speak about it, celebrate it in love and dance. But we must move beyond the many cliches and abstract ways in which we refer to love. The great spiritual teacher Eric Butterworth, who has informed much of my thinking over the years, says we must personalize and practice what it means to be creative in the image and likeness of God. He says we should note the logical implication of this. Each of us is created in and of love. God loves us. God is love in us. Each of us is the very activity of love. We have all the love we need to love everything and everyone. Our joy and happiness depend on our willingness to draw a larger circle of love, to love one another as God loves us, without motives or conditions. For us to achieve this ideal means making a basic choice to focus on love and let go of the rest. to begin seeing each other through the eyes of God. This might be more easily done in some idyllic place away from the pushing of everyday life, but for us to maintain that consciousness of love, we must make a constant effort. Meditating on love daily will help you stay centered in the flow of love. Allow your eyes to close. Take a few deep breaths. Now relax your breathing and let it find its own natural rhythm. As you exhale, feel yourself descending deeper and deeper within yourself. When you feel completely relaxed, imagine you are light as a feather, floating through the air to a favorite quiet spot, filled with fragrant flowers, the shore of a crystal lake, the gentle slope of a grassy hill. Feel yourself resting there. You feel so free, so safe, and one with love and beauty surrounding you, the perfection that is you. Talk to God within you. Ask for the strength to love and to help and release anything from your heart that is not an expression of love. Feel the healing energy moving through your body, sweeping away any fear, anger, jealousy, any negativity you're holding. Anything that is not in harmony with love is releasing itself from you, floating away, and you smile as it leaves you. Feel the loving energy bubbling up inside of you, streaming out of your every pore to the universe and back into you. You feel so good, so peaceful. Your heart is open. Loving requires open-heartedness and the moral courage Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. so often spoke of. It requires that we make a fundamental choice to act with kindness and charity, and that we begin reorganizing our thinking and our lives in ways that are consistent with our choice to be loving. We must take the time to think about what choosing to be loving really means in our lives. Dr. King said that after much contemplation, he felt he had discovered for himself the most durable power in the universe and the highest good. It is love. Love was the guiding principle in his life. Even as a young man in his 20s, with most of his life still before him, his commitment to love gave him the courage to risk his life and limb for the freedom of his people. His commitment to love gave him the courage and conviction to do what he felt was God's will. While we may not make the enormous personal sacrifices that Dr. King made, we too must search our souls to discover what choosing to love will mean in our lives. What will the decision to be loving require when your parents or your partner get on your last nerve? How will you behave when faced with a great disappointment? How will you respond when someone disrespects you, treats you unfairly or unkindly? Will you say within yourself to the person who hurt you most in your life, I love you, I forgive you, and I bless you? Will you forgive yourself in exactly the same way? Patience, kindness, and gentleness are among the greatest virtues, but sometimes we believe these are signs of weakness. Just the opposite is true. It takes great strength to love someone who has been unlovable. It takes great strength to love someone who has been unlovable. If you are having difficulty in any relationship, you can take the first step in changing the energy between you and the other person. You can send blessings to anyone you find hard to love. Make a list of the person's good qualities. Everyone has good qualities. And bless that person for those good qualities. Say within yourself, I bless you for your intellect, your neatness, or whatever it is you admire. Say it from your heart and mean it. Then think about the person's behavior and what you don't like. Maybe it's selfishness or negativity. Turn the paper over and make a list of the traits that are opposite of the disruptive behavior. In this case, generosity and positiveness. Now bless the individual in the same way for possessing those good qualities. Sending your blessings a few times a day to a person who are in conflict with is helpful in reducing misunderstanding and hostility. It doesn't change the other person, it changes you. It softens your heart. It helps how you treat and respond to that person. When you resent or resist someone, that negativity is felt by them just as your open-heartedness is. No matter how horrible someone's attitude may be, negativity is diminished in the light of love. Relate to what's best about a troublesome person. This way, we encourage them to magnify their good qualities and to help them grow. During your conversations, sincerely try to substitute praise for condemnation. All of us, regardless of how we behave or in the face of what we show the world, are yearning for love. It's no fun holding grudges. The longer you hold on to anger, the more it hardens your heart. Bitterness limits you, your energy, and your happiness. When you give up feelings of resentment, you gain inner peace. Loving is essential to your own spiritual development. When you make the choice to love without condition, you feel closer to the person in the world, and there is less tension and stress in your life. You're living on a higher ground. Love is a magnet. It attracts the best of everything. It attracts the most positive relationships because nothing less will do. When you're a loving person, you don't have to look for meaningful relationships. People are drawn to you because you are non-judgmental. They can be themselves with you, so they want to be in your loving space. When you open your heart, you're ready for communion and your love mate appears. You aren't looking for perfection. You see a relationship as a chance for both you and your partner to unfold and develop. When you are loving, you are doing God's work. You are living the truth of your being. You are in perfect balance. You feel so strong and so secure. You've come into a relationship with a full cup. You have love bubbling up inside you. So you're not needy, not looking for a partner to give you what you're already giving yourself. Your honey's love adds sweetness to an already satisfying life. Loving gives you grace and divine understanding. You love your partner despite any faults because you love yourself despite of your own. Trust that everything you need can be gained through loving. Like tuning into music on your radio. You don't have to understand radio waves in order for it to work. You only have to plug it in and turn it on. Discover the nature and power of love. Discovering the nature and the power of love must become our life's work. Our people and the many suffering throughout the world are counting on our awakening. Love and peace are possible through our example. We can grow in our understanding of the divine process by putting it into moment-to-moment practice. Don't wait for love. You are love. Get busy loving. Loving gets you the inner peace and freedom you're seeking. Loving gives you wings.
Very good.
Thank you for letting me share that. One more? Well, I guess I'm done unless there's someone who has any questions or comments or want to share something with us. I know when I first read this, I thought to myself, why did she write this 20 years ago before I went through all this pain and love relationships? And I thought this would have done me so much good, but that wouldn't have been true. We all know 20 years ago, you wouldn't have listened to it this way. It wouldn't have made that kind of sense. You needed to suffer your own pain and do stuff in order to appreciate where you are now. The only thing this book did for me is soothe and confirm my feelings. It made me realize that I am on the right path. And she did give me some tips in dealing with people who might not necessarily, respond to the type of love that you might have to offer. Some people are resentful. They have pain in their lives, and they don't know how to express it. They don't know how to reach to you, and they harbor resentment, and it shows. And you think, how do you deal with that? Because for me, I thought I was growing in love when I was able to love with society labeled as undesirable people. That was a big step for me. People put labels on one another and they think, oh, this person is mean and angry, and this person is crazy, this person. And I thought because I had learned to reach out to people like that I had made a large step. But that's easy. That is easy in comparison to loving someone, maybe it's my ego, who resents me personally for no reason that I can see. Now that's harder. When a person doesn't love anyone, you think, he doesn't love me, he doesn't love anybody in this room. So what? And then I was in the habit of loving easy people to love. I tend to like charismatic people. That's easy. You like people that everybody else like, that's no challenge. But to love and reach out to someone who is mean towards you personally or resentful and say something kind or try to be there for them, that takes a lot of effort. That takes putting your ego aside. Because this might have been the same chick that did something so mean to you, and you might have thought at the time it was unjustified. But when you take what she did to you and use it as a lesson, and you think, this is going to make me stronger, because without the challenge of forcing myself to love that person, how can I grow? When you can overcome that, when you can overcome loving someone who reaches out and intentionally tries to hurt you or harm you or some kind of, that's really putting the test of love. For me, that was really putting the test of love. I don't know if you guys share that same idea, but I still have a lot of growing. Don't by any means think because I'm reading from this book and I'm enjoying it and I'm feeling love even right now that I'm there. I'm far from there. It might be a few more lifetimes, maybe many lifetimes, but I do feel some amount of progress because I'm definitely not the same Avi I was last year this time. And I just wanted to be able to share that chapter. I really wasn't sure which chapter I was going to share.
That's a perfect chapter.
Oh, okay. But it was almost chosen for you guys because I happen to have this book on tape and I listen to it occasionally. And I thought, well, maybe, while I'm doing some housework and getting myself ready, Susan will recite a chapter that I might want to repeat instead because I had already selected this. But I thought maybe they might not want to hear this. And I put the tape in. Do you know she started at this chapter? I'm like, well, then I know. This is like chapter 9 and 10 in the book. And I'm like, oh, yeah, I know. You guys have to get this message. So,
so much.
You're very welcome.
It's beautiful. Actually, we should add that to one of Jesus' Beatitudes. Last week we were talking about the Beatitudes that they appeared in Matthew. And so we must add the attitude of Abia now. Blessed are those who have been persecuted for the sake of love, for theirs is the kingdom. They will become enlightened. It's so beautiful, and it's very appropriate since we are talking about Jesus, who is perhaps one of history's greatest masters of love. So it's a very, very appropriate topic. In fact, all discussion of spirituality essentially is nothing more than a discussion of love. And so that it's very, very appropriate that you selected that topic to start us off today. And so, speaking of starting off, let us plunge right in. As you will recall, last week we were beginning to look into the teachings of Jesus in search of the mysticism that he brought with his ministry into the world. And I must tell you, one of the most difficult things to do throughout this series is to confine myself. When we talk about exploring the mysticism of the Bible, you have to understand, for me, it's like a kid with $10 in a candy store. I hardly know where to begin because there's so much in this Bible. It is not ironic that when the teachings of Jesus were first extended to the rest of the non-Jewish world, and as these Gospels began to be translated, one of the titles that they gave to the body of teachings of Jesus was Ta Biblia, the Bible, the book of books. It is really interesting because of all of the various paths of spirituality that we will find throughout the world and throughout time, almost every aspect of the teachings can be found in this Biblia. Hence, the book of books. It is a tremendous, tremendous gift that has been bequeathed to mankind. In spite of all of the other problems that you may find with the Bible, the mistranslations, the intentional insertion of words and sayings that were not related to Jesus, the submitting of the Bible as a tool of politics to indoctrinate and to enable certain people seeking power to more easily come into power. In spite of all of these shortcomings, this book of books still remains one of the greatest achievements in the history of mankind. And it is really strange that we're sitting here now seriously looking at this Bible. And I was thinking, Bilal, that even had I not been born into the Western culture, had I not been born into a family that had adopted Christianity as a tradition, had none of that occurred, had I not heard the word Bible in the name Jesus, had I been born in some other culture, I would have definitely have sought out these teachings, with no exception. It is really strange. I know many of us very often fantasize about what we have done had we had the opportunity to live during the time of Jesus. And for me, that answer is clear. I definitely would have been at his feet. After all, in this birth, I went to the feet of what I felt was a Jesus. Those of us in this birth who have sought out the gurus, who have sought out the masters, who have sought out the modern sages, we were those same souls that sought out Jesus. You see? Would have been no problem for me. I would have had no problem accepting his divinity. I would have had no problem accepting the fact that this is an incarnation of God. I had none in this birth. As a very young man, when even the understanding that there were men and women on earth who had fully evolved and manifested divinity, who were gurus, without a hesitation, I moved toward them. I was ready to drop everything, all tradition, all religion, all superstition. Such was my response to the call of the modern gurus, the modern Jesus. It is no doubt in my mind that I would have found myself somewhere amongst those disciples of Jesus Christ, prepared to pay that very price that they paid. I have been prepared to pay it in this birth. Please bear in mind that as we move through these beautiful teachings of Jesus, you look at yourself, examine yourself very deeply. Because many of you have a problem with accepting the fact that there can be a human that is both divine and human. You have problems with that. You still think that God is some kind of mysterious, ethereal entity somewhere beyond the cosmos. And you would have had a problem during the time of Jesus as well. You would not have wanted to submit to this man, simply because he appeared to be a man. You would have been amongst those who would have called for his crucifixion, who would have charged him with blasphemy. It is at least now, after 2,000 years, that finally you have evolved to a point where you can entertain the possibility that a man can be God, that a woman was God, and walk this road. For most, it almost seems mystical. It is hard to believe that such a man like Jesus really exists. Many of the historians still doubt whether such a phenomenon occurred. So we want to put this thing in its proper psychological perspective as we enter now into the continuing teachings of this tremendous master that history tells us what is Jesus. I know that I had promised you that I would try to follow the order of the New Testament, but you should understand how I'm going to do that. Now that's too much. The greed in me. There is a legitimate use of greed. All greed is not bad. Wants to plunge deeper and deeper into these beautiful teachings. And of the books that make up the New Testament, we have said before that the first three books, the books of Matthew and Luke and Mark, are the synoptic gospels. Synoptic because essentially by reading any one of those books, you will get an overall picture of Jesus that will be the same in any of the two succeeding books. So they are saying pretty much the same thing. It is a synopsis. And the fourth gospel is the gospel that we will turn our attention to today, the Gospel of John. Because in this gospel, you'll get an opportunity to encounter a very different Jesus. You will please notice that as you read the Gospels, the first three Gospels, you get a picture of Jesus as that supremely developed man of righteousness. In the three Gospels, his divinity does not come through as clearly. It is there, but it is buried amidst of the tales about his humanity, his ordinariness. You get a sense of a supremely righteous man, yes. You get a sense of the moral teachings of Jesus, yes. It is there. But it is in St. John that we encounter the Christ. It is almost as if the writers of the first three Gospels had encountered Jesus and they had given their summation and estimations of the teachings of this Jesus. But it appears that the writer of this fourth Gospel, John, had encountered the Christ, a very different phenomenon. You will notice the absence of the myth about the birth and all of this. In the fourth Gospel, they go directly to the heart of the mysticism of the New Testament. And because this, after all, is a workshop where we are exploring the mysticism of the New Testament, then it is appropriate that we should now turn our attention to John. And remember, we can go back and forth. During the questioning segment of our workshop, please take every liberty to address any part of the scriptures that you like. You're not even restricted to the New Testament. If there's still something in the Old Testament that you would like to explore, that is absolutely fine. So I want to allow us to have more room today. The problem, of course, is the same as we encounter with the other three Gospels, the Synoptic Gospels, is that we really don't know much about the author of this fourth Gospel. We say the Gospel according to John But it's just a saying. There's no evidence, no proof. We don't know who wrote this gospel. But whoever wrote this gospel must have had a tremendous comprehension of mysticism. Whether in fact it is John, the disciple of Jesus, is questioned by most scholars in the story. There was a beloved disciple in Jerusalem, perhaps the 13th disciple, that is never mentioned in the other three gospels, that many historians feel is the author of this gospel. But again, it is just another theory of another scholar. Therefore, the only thing that we have is the teachings themselves. Its authorship remains a question. And it is the first 14 verses of John chapter 1 that really constitute the whole heart of the mysticism of the New Testament. Therefore, it is this that we turn our attention to. Because if we do not understand this, then we have not understood what it was that was trying to be made plain to us. Achahavi has talked about love this morning, you see? And love is a very mysterious phenomenon. We're talking about the mysticism of the Bible. You have to understand, what is mysticism? Have you ever thought about it? The word mysticism, what does that word evoke in you? What does it mean to you? According to me, mysticism is a kind of knowledge that you can only attain via personal experience. That's what mysticism is. There are all kinds of knowledges, all kinds of gnosis, all kinds of categories of knowledge. But the mysteries, and remember, Christianity was a mystery. It partook in the same historical culture as all the other Hellenistic teachings. It inherited the same basic label that the ancient Egyptian systems of spiritual cultivation was labeled. It was a mystery. And like any mystery, a mystery is something you can only know from first-hand personal experience. That it is no possibility to learn anything about mysticism from another person. Please make a note. You cannot become a mystic without necessarily undergoing the process on a personal basis. I'm emphasizing this because our author will spend a lot of time when we get to the chapter dealing with Nicodemus. This is the thing that he was trying to explain to Nicodemus. That unless you be born again, unless you actually undergo the first-hand personal experience, the process of Christianity, you can never know nothing about Jesus and his teaching. You can never know nothing about it at all. So it's a very, very different concept here that we must bear in mind as we explore these beautiful teachings. So, Alia, if you will read for us John verses 1 through 14, we will try to make some headway into this.
The divinity of Christ. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. The same was in the beginning with God. All things were made by him, and without him was not anything made that was made. In him was life, and the life was the light of men. And the light shineth in the darkness, and the darkness comprehended it not. There was a man sent from God, whose name was John. The same came for a witness, to bear witness of the light, that all men through him might believe. He was not that light, but was to bear witness of that light. That was the true light, which lightened every man that cometh into the world. He was in the world, and the world was made by him, and the world knew him not. He came into his own, and his own received him not. But as many as received him, To them gave he power to become the sons of God, even to them that believe on his name, which were born not of blood, nor of the will of the flesh, nor of the will of man, but of God. And the Word was made flesh and dwelt among us. And we beheld his glory, the glory as of the only begotten of the Father, full of grace and truth.
Now, there are very many different translations of the Greek. That we understand that the way that the Gospels were copied was not like today. There was no Xerox machines. There was no sophisticated printing apparatus. These Gospels was written out by hand, long, tedious labor. And so there was a lot of mistakes that were made, innocent mistakes, in the translation from Aramaic, which is a Semitic language, into the Greek. And then from the Greek into the Vulgate, into the Latin, there was even more mistakes that arose. So I want you to bear that in mind. Hence, you will find so many different ways that these same 14 verses are worded throughout many different translations of the original Greek. And like in any translation, sometimes a mistranslation of one word can throw out the whole meaning of a thing. So you will bear with me as I try to take some liberties and try to give to you what I feel to be more consistent with this rendering of this fourth gospel. And also, at the same time, I want you to also remember that apart from the innocent mistakes that is inevitable whenever we are translating from one language to the next language, there's also something lost when you're translating from one culture to another culture. There's something lost in addition to the fact that there were many different competing schools, if you recall last time, who are all competing to become the dominant formators of the dogma and doctrine of Christianity. So some of the mistranslations were motivated out of politics. So we have to kind of wade through all of this to get a true sense of what this powerful, powerful prologue of John is all about. The idea that the creation came into being as a result of a word is not a new concept that begins with John. You must first of all understand this. That the first century Christians had inherited a great deal of their mysticism from the tradition of mysticism in Judaism. In Genesis, you will read something very similar to what you have read in this prologue of John. So it seems then that the mysticism of Moses passed down to the mysticism of Jesus, but there was a mysticism about the origin of the cosmos that predates Moses. Those of us who are familiar with the African systems of spiritual cultivation know about the various centers of mysticism that existed in antiquity. And it was the center out of Thebes that really introduced historically the first concept of how creation comes into being out of a word. And we will review a little bit of that in the course of our discussion of this prologue from the book of Transformation of Rock and the Conquest of Apep. Okay? Translated from the pyramid text, and we will read the translation of Shechem or Shechem of the Osiris Set Society. I have found this translation to be very true to form. Actually, let us plunge now. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Now this itself requires an entire workshop just to understand this thing. In the beginning doesn't mean at the beginning of time. Before there was time, there was no time yet. Was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was What is this word that have existed, that is God, that is synonymous with God? What is this word? Certainly, it is not the word that makes up the pages of this book. Many Christians say, this is the word of God. This paper has not created anything. This paper has not created the cosmos. It has not created the universe. It was created by us, in fact. So this physical book cannot be the word of God. This book did not exist before time. It did not exist before space. This book is not the same as God. And I'm emphasizing this because many people who profess to be Christians still think this is the word of God. This is not the word. The word that was God is not a physical thing at all. This is the mysticism, so you can begin to see that John, straight off the bat, dispenses with everything and immediately plunge into the unraveling of this mysticism. In the beginning was the Word. And we need to understand what is this Word. It is very important to understand this Word because this Word is the source and origin of creation is spoken about in all spiritual systems of culture. The ancient Egyptians, mystics and sages called it the Metunata. Those of you who have studied the Metunata, you see, again have made the same error as the Christians have. You think the Metunata is a book. It is not a book. It is not hieroglyphs. It is the Word that was God and with God, out of which everything arisen. The Muslim mystic call it karma. And the Vedas they call it na or namma. The Saint tradition in India call it Shabbat. The African mystic sub-Saharan called it Nimmo. There's been many names to make reference to this word. And it is very important that you understand this because Jesus' whole deity rests on this. You see? A little later in the prologue, John is telling us that he was the Word made flesh. Interesting. To give us a better understanding of this, we will have to back up now and have a brief discussion on cosmology. And I will keep it as brief as possible. But it is so important that you understand this thing. One of the things that we do not fully grasp is the fact that when we talk about the fact that we are made in God's image, what does that mean? Have you ever thought about it? What about you is made in the image of God? Avia gave us a hint that she said love is one of the attributes. Those who know about these things say that we are all the incarnation of the Word of God. With no exception.
So we are all parts of the whole.
We are all a manifestation of the whole. About this word, I just want to share with you something from the book of Transformation to Glory. And this is and it's hard to call it God because we can't call it God. God itself emerged out of this primordial, whatever you want to call it. We don't even have a name for it. The ancestors call it Nu. Nu. Whatever this thing was, the Lord, the creator of the cosmos, itself emerged out of this. The best definition we can give it is undifferentiated consciousness and energy. Undifferentiated, no form, nothing is the term that the Buddhists have for it. No thing, no form, pure potential. Formlessness, nothing. And out of this no thing, out of this meaning, out of this undifferentiated consciousness and energy, that emerged the creator that we call God. Now this is very unique because the mysticism is deep. The stuff is deep. have to struggle to try to understand this. Because in understanding this, you'll be able to appreciate the power of this gospel of John. In fact, many Christian scholars, and particularly the followers of first century Christianity, held the gospel of John as being the book, even in the book. That if all other gospels was removed, if you just kept just these 14 lines, if you kept just this gospel of John, that would be enough. If you could just understand that. So it's a very deep thing, and you want to try to understand this. So try to imagine, and I know it's impossible, but try nevertheless to imagine nothingness. The sea of undifferentiated consciousness and energy. Energy had not took form. Consciousness was conscious of no content. There was no contents of consciousness. That had not came into being. It was just pure consciousness. Consciousness was conscious just of consciousness. There was no object of consciousness at all. Energy was in no form at all. Nothing. Nothing that makes up experience. The ancient African mystics say that, and out of this purely subjective, undifferentiated state of consciousness and energy, that the thing that preceded even God says that I brought into my mouth my own name. That is to say, a word of power. And even I, came into being in the form of things which came into being. I want you to note the similarity because I want you to see the historical origin of this insight of John. I want you to become very clear that John, though, did not introduce this concept of the Word being made flesh to the world for the first time, that this was a very ancient concept, and that in doing so he was simply following in the footsteps of the mystics that had preceded him by some 3,000 years. He says that I came into being from the primeval matter, energy, formless energy. I came into being from that. He said, not existed created things in any land. I made whatsoever was made. Everything that was made came out of me. I was alone. Not existed any other who was with me. So I want you to get a sense of the flavor of this statement of John. He said that in the beginning was this Word, and this Word was with God, and the Word was God. But still we have not answered the question, what is this Word? You can almost imagine that this process took place along the following line. Because the Word is a process. That's the first thing I want you to understand. The Word is a process took place. I know it's a little hard, but let's get the hard stuff out of the way. We can play later with these concepts. So, the Word is a process through which creation came into being. The word that the ancestor gave to the first component of the process, we translate as omnipresence. They symbolized it as a soft, the will. The will arose in this primordial seed of nothingness. A will suddenly arose. And as this will arose, it took a form, a mental form. We call that mental form thought. It is that aspect of God that is called omniscience, knowing. So this thought took a form. And that thought now shaped the energy, the matter. And in the process of shaping the energy and matter, it made a sound. Hence we use the term word. Words are what? Fundamentally sound. You hear words in the process of thinking. Thoughts make sounds. Thought is a sound. So in the beginning was the thought of God. That thing, whatever you want to call it, thought, creation into being. They literally spoke creation into being, because speech is nothing but a lower manifestation of thought. Hence the ancient mystics of Africa had a profound insight into the divine speech, they say. This Natur created. It is a profound thing. You wanted to explore the mysticism of the Bible, is that correct? Is that what you wanted? Yeah. Okay, then that's what we'll try to do, right? So in the beginning was this Word, and this Word was with God. This potential, for this whole process was embedded in this primordial seed of nothingness. It was with God. Here the author is using God to refer to that state. He was, in the next verse he says, he was in the beginning with God. Before time, I've already said there was no time yet. There was no space. So it's not like back to day one. No, he's not talking about day one. It is a correct word would be that before time it was with God. Before time this word was with God. And all things came into being by him. And here, of course, they're using the masculine. That's a whole nother story. This is a kind of deviation a little bit. Even within the tradition of Christianity and Judaism. In the Old Testament, it was Sophia, that the feminine aspect of this Yahweh that actually created. And of course this sense has been lost down through time. In fact, not much is even discussed about what they call the Chokwa. Okay? But anyway, this is sort of like the problems that we have in these translations and the politics that's around it. In any case, all things came into being, and apart from it, and I like to use the word it, you see, so to give it no kind of gender. How can God have a gender? Now this is nonsense. This is nonsense. God has no gender. God is not even a person. This is even more incorrect. But we have to labor with the language as it appears here in the gospel and try to extract from it its deeper, more symbolic meaning. So all things came into being by it, and apart from it, nothing came into being that has came into being. Everything that exists is a manifestation of it. Everything, with no exception. Hence, everything is worthy of your respect. Everything is worthy of your love. Everything, with no exception. In it was life, and the light was the light of men. Light means consciousness. Light symbolically represents consciousness. In it was consciousness. And this consciousness became the consciousness of men. The origin of your consciousness is from this primordial source of undifferentiated consciousness energy. Think about it. From where have your consciousness come? The consciousness that supports your individuality, from where does it arise? Where did it come from? It itself is immaterial. It was not a result of any cell splitting. It's not material. From where has it come? It is the search for the origin of this source of consciousness that constitutes the whole aim and objective of spiritual systems of development. And Christianity was no different from any other spiritual system of development. It had as its origin the union with this ultimate source of consciousness. Indeed, as we will see shortly in these Gospels, that was one of the functions of Jesus. It has been the function of all masters. Jesus, in some respect, is symbolic of the archetypical master. In Jesus, you will find qualities of all masters, all gurus, all teachers who have come from that same region. In any case, it says, and the consciousness shines in the darkness, and the darkness comprehends it not. Now, this is powerful. I have to take a little of your time here. I know it's painful, but please bear with me, okay? This consciousness shines into darkness. This is symbolic language. This consciousness mingles into matter. Darkness represents matter. It mingles into matters and it does not comprehend itself. Please understand this is deep. And what has happened? Your consciousness is in this body and you do not comprehend who you are. You have no idea who you are. You start thinking you are the body. You don't know who you are. Your identification is with the body now. You are that light of God. You are that spark, that ray of light, that ray of consciousness that has descended into the darkness of this physicality, and you do not comprehend it. You do not know it. This is the predicament that we all are in. This is the predicament that Jesus came to take us out of. He says further in the gospel that there came a man sent from God whose name was John. Please note, John too came from the same place that Jesus came from. I want you to understand that because many Christians think that John somehow was lower than Christ. But John was his guru. How can he be lower? John initiated him. More about that. Very controversial. Because if you were perfect, what was the need for your initiation? John initiated people to wipe away their sin. What sin could you have if you were in fact God? As many claim. A lot of problems with this sin. And many of the translators of early gospel altered a lot of the teachings in order to somehow make sense of their nonsense as it relates to this issue. He said, there came a man sent from God whose name was John. Sent from God means what? There came a man full of this consciousness, this man who had been sent from God. And you have to understand, when we talk about God, we're not talking about some entity, some thing that is outside of yourself. No. One of the things that characterizes the teaching of Jesus is that the kingdom is within you. Therefore, God is within you. That's the first thing. You have to understand that at the core of your being there is God. That in each and every one of us, God exists in us. God is our reality. But this reality, this consciousness, this light has shone into this darkness of physicality and does not comprehend yourself. You do not know that you are God. And that is the source of all your misery. And we will begin to see the incredible skill that Jesus summoned to begin to push us to that level. So when we talk about men and women sent from God, we're talking about men and women who have made union with that highest state of consciousness, that have moved deep into the very core of their being and they're rediscovering their true identity. We all participate in the attributes of God. All of us, with no exception, have unlimited power. With no exception. Any limiting thought, you know, arises from some lower part of your being. The moment that you are able to become more conscious, to move closer to the source of God in you, all limitation drops out. God, by definition, has no limitations. None. That's why we say that one of the attributes of God is omnipotence, all powerful. No limitations at all. And notice when you start thinking, oh, I can't do this, I can't do that, I can't stop eating meat, I can't meditate, I can't live without this, I can't be happy, I can't demonstrate love, as Bhagwan was saying earlier today. All of these are limitations you are imposing upon yourself. And why are you imposing them? Because you have become identified with the darkness. You have not comprehended yourself. The light, the consciousness has shined in this darkness. Therefore, you have identified with your physicality, which is a very limited phenomenon. So all sense of limitation that you are experiencing, please make a note of that. It is arising simply because you have not evolved to that level of God. I want you to understand that the possibilities of evolving to the level of God within you, and what Jesus called entering into the kingdom of that God, and in that kingdom of that God, generate the experience of heaven here on earth, right now. So we have not evolved into that part of ourselves. We're still inextricably caught up in the darkness. But God sent a man from there named John. He came for a witness, that he might bear witness of the light that all men believe through him. John came to bear witness that yes, this level of consciousness exists. Look at me. Look at me. My life is a testimony to that fact. This level of consciousness is available. Look how I live. It's interesting. You and I, we go through these gurus because you're trying to get their teaching. Okay, what is the guru teaching? Let me take notes and see what the guru says. Suso, who understood the way to approach a master, was not like that. Suso, when asked, why are you going to see the great Zen master? You've heard of his great teachings like I have? No doubt. And what a good time we're going to have when we get there. And we'll be able to drink up all the master knowledge. And Suso said to the man, said, wait, you misunderstanding me. I'm going to watch how the man ties shoes. Meaning I'm going to see how he lived ordinarily, how he interact with his wife, how he interact with his neighbor, how he interact with the world, how he interact with his community. I'm going to learn this thing here. I'm not going to pick up some elbow information. It's not about information. God sent a man named John to bear witness that this level of consciousness exists. And he said, and that all might believe through him. Because I understand, it's hard for you to believe that a Buddha or Mahavir or Kabir or Dadu or Swamiji or Zarathustra or Jesus were actually people. It seems so long ago, it's almost mythological. How could these kind of people exist? That's not possible. How could they do that, right? It's hard for us to believe that there were human beings that had total control over their promiscuousness, over their sexuality, that were not limited, that had freedom. It's hard, I understand that. God always has to send another human being just like us, simply to demonstrate to us that this is possible. Why not? If a Buddha could, why can't you? Buddha had nothing essentially different from you. The Christ is in all of us. And remember, the word Christ is a reference to this consciousness. Please understand that. Christ is the name of a level of consciousness. Hence, Jesus the Christ. You see, Jesus is someone who has attained the level of Christ. And what is remarkable about the story about it, that he came from the womb. This is remarkable. More about that later. He was not the light, but came that he might bear witness of that light. Here you can see the contradiction. Here you can see a little playing around with it, right? You got to keep John a little low now, right? Because we got to make room so that we can stack Jesus on top of him. You see. Here you can see the politics of it all. In the verse before that, the man was sent from God. Now it says, but just a few lines later, but he was not that light. He was not a participant in that consciousness. You see, he came to bear witness of it. Right? And the word is not light so much, I think. You see. He was not perhaps the master, is what he was trying to say. And we can understand, disciples sometimes get carried away. You see, because they feel that their master is the only master and that all other masters are fakes and fraud. Much like we do with our religion, you know, that my religion is higher than your religion. That's an ego trip. You see, now we are simply projecting our own egotism onto our religion. I am a Buddhist, therefore my religion is higher than yours. Now, this is nonsense. Buddha never would even teach such nonsense. But your ego simply is expressing itself through your philosophy. And perhaps the translator, the transcriber of this gospel, will work it in the interest of some other ulterior motive. There was the true light, the writer says, which coming into the world enlightens every man. Very profound. Whenever a man or woman of this degree of consciousness comes into the world, it enlightens every man. Now this is a strange saying. It is a saying in Buddhism that any being that comes within a 24-mile radius of Buddha, whether human or insect, is guaranteed to become enlightened. Profound. Profound. The illustration of light is like in this room there's a source of light. When that light comes on, all of us can see by participating in the presence of that light. The very fact that this Jesus comes into the world creates the possibility now of everybody becoming enlightened. It's a profound thing. All who have seen, all who can see the presence now of a human being just like themselves who have evolved to the level of God consciousness and participates in those same attributes as God. I just said that one of the attributes of God is omnipotence, all-powerful, no sense of limitation whatsoever. Another one is omniscience, all knowledge, what the Buddhists call prajna, wisdom, of the wisdom of perfection. Can know anything. Now contrast that to us, we can't know nothing. Now with our little intellects, you see, we're all the time making decisions, and then 5 minutes later we figure out, oh my God, I did it all wrong. It was wrong. I made the wrong decision. I married the wrong woman, took the wrong job, moved in the wrong neighborhood, caught the wrong train, went down the wrong highway. Now just look at this. Our life is laced with ignorance. Why? Because you have not evolved to that part of your being that contains that attribute of God called omniscience. And when we are able to arrive into that state of omniscient consciousness, there is no error. Period. At all. You have to understand. When I say there's no error, I mean Jesus' word would be, there is no more sin. You have to understand what we mean by sin. The transcribers of Scripture, whenever they transcribe the Greek word hamartano, they translate it as sin. Hamartano means to miss the mark. It's a big difference. The concept was the same as that in archery. In fact, the Greek word hamartano came from the archery. At that time, of course, archery was alive. And just as the archer, when he aims and pulls and releases the
arrow. If the arrow misses the center of the target, you do not blame the target. You do not blame the arrow. You look back to the archer. You missed the mark. You were unconscious. You weren't paying attention. Your mind was drifting. Strum the bow again and pay attention. It is in that sense that the word sin was meant, as it was used by Jesus, as it has been meant by all masters. We have this tendency to err because of our disconnection from the source of infallibility that lies deep in the recesses of our own being. Hence sin. Hence you can understand all people are born in sin. Of course. Not that you were born in evil. No. This is a misunderstanding. A total misunderstanding. This is the politics, you see. Now because of the priests can get you to start thinking that you are full of evil and all this other stuff, it's easier now to exploit you, easier to manipulate you. It is simply error. You make an error. You predispose to make an error. And we see that in our life. Look, our lives are full of nothing but sin. Jesus is absolutely right. The early Christian mystics absolutely right. We're just full of nothing but sin from top to bottom. But sin in this sense, that we're just full of that stuff that continuously make errors. And as you make these errors, what is the result of this error? What Avi has called dukkha, suffering. Sin, error, missing the mark always lead to suffering. Sin, error, missing the mark always destroys love, with no exception. Please make a note of that. Full of sin, you will not be able to have the experience of love. That's not possible. How is that possible? You have no knowledge, you have no gnosis, you have no wisdom. You have not contacted the omniscience in you. Everything you do will be wrong. Everything. Underline it. Nothing you do will come out right. There is no possibility because you have not evolved to that part of your being that reflects the inherent attributes of God in omniscience. And when these masters come, you see, their light can light up our light, much like a candle is used to light another. If you can understand. But some of us are so ignorant, we say, well, I can light my own candle, Jesus. I don't need you. There were thousands of people there who felt they didn't need Jesus. Moses has come. When we visit a little further in the Gospels and we come across the Samaritan woman at the well, she said, well, hey, Moses done told us all this stuff, Jesus. We know all this stuff. And we feel like that. Oh, I know everything. You see, I don't need, anybody. I already have the light. Yes, you have light, then look at your light. Look at it. Does it look like you have light? Does it look like you have knowledge? He continues, he says, he was in the world, and the world was made through him, and the world did not know him. It was in the world. He was in the world, and the world was made through him, and the world did not know him. This is beautiful. This God, you see, this God is in you. It has made you. It has made all of your experience. It's running everything in your system. Everything. It is splitting all your stuff. It is breathing. And Scripture says in the world, rule the world we are, did not know. Now this is amazing. God is in you and you do not know that. What could be a greater penalty? What could be a greater suffering? This very Lord that we are looking for all over the place is in us. And you do not know it. He came to his own, and those who were his own did not receive. This has meaning on many levels. First of all, just on the level of the human manifestation of God, that human being who has evolved to that level of God consciousness. Whenever they come to his own, what will be the treatment when they come to their own? They will be rejected. Why? It has always been the case with masters. In the Synoptic Gospels, we read in there where Jesus is seen teaching, and his brothers and his mama come by there and said, what is he doing up in that teaching? You know, is that Mary's bastard up there teaching? What do we know? What are you doing up in there? Actually, Mary and Jesus' brother thought he was a little nuts. On one occasion, they set out to go get him. They wanted to get him out of there because they felt he was a little crazy, you see. Get him out of there. He's in there saying all kinds of stuff in there. He might get killed. You understand? Hence, Jesus says that a prophet is never honored in their own home. Never. Has never been. So on one level, he is saying something about Jesus. That this human being who was able to evolve to the level of God consciousness that was wide and inherent in his own being, to have become enlightened, was not accepted by his own. And his own also means the Jews, because Jesus was a Jew. And the Jews were waiting for a Messiah, you see, to come. But they could not accept him as his own. They did not see Jesus as the fulfillment of Moses. They did not see him as the Moshiach. Could not accept him at all. Although many of them had accepted many other pretenders of being the Messiah. You have to understand, it was a long history. Had been many that come. They accepted these people because they might have came from outside. You see, many of first century Jews, you know, had no problem becoming followers of Mithra, you see, or following the Eleusinian mysteries, you see, or Diogenes or any of that. Because why? It's outside, something new, perhaps better. As long as we know he's not a Jew. You see. On another level, of course, we're like that Jew. This God is in us, and you cannot accept the fact that God is in you. And how is it that you do not accept the God in you? It's through your action, because you don't think nobody's watching you. You don't think God is conscious of anything that you do. You think you are slipping and sliding and running around here doing God knows what, telling all kinds of lies, and you think that this God is not aware of that. You do not accept the presence of this all-knowing, all-seeing God. The ancient African mystics represented it with the eye of Heru. It meant that this consciousness in you is like this eye of this hawk that can see from the farthest distance. And we do not accept the presence. The third aspect of God, this omnipresence, sees everything. It's everything. She's everything. Sees all, everything that you do. If you could do nothing more than acknowledge the presence of God in you, your whole life will undergo a radical transformation. All that drug and alcohol and all that nonsense will simply fall away. And you're only able to do it by remaining unconscious, in fact. A little further in gospel, we see that those who are full of sin, who love sin, they like this kind of stuff. They love darkness because they're not exposed. Which means you love to be unconscious. You like this state of unconsciousness because in this state of unconsciousness you can work all your evil. In this state of consciousness, you can continue to sin. But if you acknowledge the presence of God lying at the core of your being, fully aware of every act that you commit, you will not be able to sin. It's impossible. Sin comes from the absence of this awareness of the presence of God in the deepest core of your being. Hence, now you can easily roll over and void your devotion in your meditation. No problem, because nobody sees you. Bhagwan is not there, and no other Radachi around. Nobody sees you. He don't know. He don't know whether I meditated, didn't meditate. My wife ain't around. I can go cheat with this woman. She can't see me. Look at this nonsense. Even God can't see me. You show up at church the next day, full of Holy Ghost. You see? And the night before, you was out doing God knows what. And how can you even show your face in the temple? It is only because you think God didn't see any of it. You don't know what I did last night. This is nonsense. This is nonsense. But as many as received him, to them he gave the right to become children of God, even to those who believed in his name. And this is beautiful. Again, on many levels, we can interpret these things. You have to remember, all these scriptures can be interpreted on many levels. We can interpret them historically, in the sense that did this event really occur? Are these Jesus' words? You know, we can look at syntax and all of these other things. We can come to some historical conclusions. We can interpret them politically. What was the motive behind putting these words in God's mouth? Who stood to benefit, etc. We can interpret them theologically. What is the dogma? What is the doctrine? What is the tradition that will follow from that? And we can interpret it mystically. And to some extent, you need to interpret scriptures on all four levels. It is beyond the scope of this workshop to be able to do that with each utterance here. But as many as received him, to them he gave the right to become children of God. Actually, it's sons of God. They changed this to children. You see? The sons of God. Why? Because all of us are sons of God. What is it that Jesus gives you? Jesus gives you the realization of who you are. Please make a note of that. That is it. Jesus provides the process by which you discover who you are. There is a Christ in all of us. In all of us. Jesus is simply someone who has manifested and attained and evolved to the level of Christ within himself, and therefore is able to help you attain the same thing. If you believe. If you believe in the Master, if you have faith, not blind belief. When Jesus talks about believing, he's not talking about blind belief. There's no place in any kind of spiritual system for blind belief. No place. The word is faith. The word is faith. You have faith. Faith in what? Not only in Jesus, but if you have faith that this God exists in you. Because you don't have faith that God even exists in you. Now this is really hard to imagine. You feel that God has created everything on this planet. God is in everything else on this planet. But God is not in me. I'm the only one that God has abandoned. That God is disconnected from. You have become an ego. You have contracted yourself. You have separated yourself from your connectedness with God. And you don't believe. You don't trust. You have no sharada. No trust in that indwelling intelligence that is splitting your cell, flawless, that is working the apparatus of your mind, you see, that has created this incredible mental organ called the brain, you see. If you're going to identify with something physical, it should be your brain. This brain comes much closer to being a physical representation of who you are than this body that the brain has fashioned. Just this brain, this little handful of gray matter, it's the thing that is seen. Without it, these eyes see nothing. It is the thing that thinks. It has created this body. It is the organ. if you have trust that this God is in you, you have faith, then to those who believe even on his name are given the ability to become sons of God, children of God. It is a powerful, powerful thing. Don't worry, I'm coming to the end now so that you can start relaxing. Okay. He says about Jesus who were born not of the blood, nor of the will of the flesh, nor of the will of man, but of God. The statement can be easily misunderstood. This Jesus, which again, Jesus is the archetype of a human being. Jesus is a type of human being we all can become, an archetype. You understand? Who was born not of blood, which means what? That to become like a Jesus is not simply a function of biology. Just being born, physically, born of blood. Because what is this body made out of? It's nothing but blood. You understand that? Right? All of this has come from blood. You're just one glob of plasma. That's all. This God-conscious human being, of which Jesus is but one of many representations of, is not born. You don't get this state of consciousness simply by virtue of your biology. Nor of the will of the flesh, you see, at all. You can't get to this level of consciousness by following your body, following your sensual nature. The word that the Greeks used was sarx. S-A-R-X. Sarx means more like sensuality. You're following your sensuality. You can't get this level of consciousness following your sensuality at all. Has nothing to do with it. Not born of the blood, nor of the will of the senses, nor the will of man. Beautiful. Man means the society. Man means some other person. Avia told us earlier, even with love, one of the greatest fallacies that you can make is to really place the burden of someone else's action on your experience of love. Now, for sure, you're never going to experience love. You've made your experience of love other dependent. And then when some person failed to trigger in you the experience of love, now you immediately go to the next person in search of it. You become a beggar. You become emotionally homeless. You simply travel from one man or one woman to the next with your hands cupped, begging for them to do something to generating you the experience of love. We do the same thing with enlightenment. I just said that mysticism is a mystery. Mystery is a kind of knowledge that can only be accessed through your own personal experience. It cannot be given to you by anybody. But you want people to give it to you. You don't want to work. You don't want to do no meditation. You do not want to put any restraints on your sensuality. You do not wish to sacrifice anything. You want someone to tap you on your head with a magic wand and voila, you spring into enlightenment. You looking for some man, some woman to transform you. And you're prepared to pay any price to this person or man who take upon themselves the arduous responsibility of transforming you. You'll give them anything, long as you don't have to do nothing. Jesus said that this thing that I attain cannot be given to you by anyone. You have to undergo the process. And remember, this is our biggest enemy on the path. is your own self. You have no other enemy. This world is not doing anything to you. You are your own enemy. In what sense? That you are trapped in the darkness and you have become fast friends with this darkness. You have shut down your own consciousness. You have reduced your own awareness so that you can go on giving vent to your own sensuality. At the story about the man at the and Baptista that could not walk had been coming to the waters for 38 years and had not been healed. And when Jesus moved through the crowd, in spite of the fact that there was hundreds and hundreds of other sick people there, he made his way straight away over to this man, asking him, what is it that you see? And the man immediately began to tell, oh, you know, I've been sick for 38 years, but I can't get into that healing water because every time I get close, you know, somebody rushing before I can get in there. And for 38 years he's been doing this. You see? And Jesus looked into this man, looked behind all this nonsense. You see, he saw something in this man. Because there are people who would rather be sick than to do that which will lead to health. Please note that. Because by being sick, they can avoid the demands and the responsibilities of life. What Kuku call a turtle ego. You know how the turtle pulls up in their shell, withdraw. You have people who suffer from turtle egotism, right? They withdraw and then they lament. They don't want to accept the responsibility. And this was this kind of man. And Jesus said, man, pick up your stick and walk. He busted him. He just busted him. Spoke deep into him. He said, drop this nonsense. Stop lying to yourself. And it's the same with us. Bhagwan, I can't do no meditation. I can't do anything with my senses. They're out of control. This is nonsense. This is nonsense. You don't want to do none. You don't want to control it. You don't want to put no restrictions on it. You like sinning. You like evil actions. You love darkness. You like being unconscious. Your father was unconscious, and you just like it. Let's be clear about this. Very clear about this. You're like that man who's been sick for 38 years on your bed, pretending that you really want to be well. Yes, you say, I want to love. You see? Yes, you always say, oh, I wish I could find someone to love. But really, you don't want to love nobody. Not really. Deep down inside, you don't want it. As I just say, yeah, you can love somebody that's perfect. What is hard with that? Anybody can do that. You see? You don't really want love because you're not willing to pay the price. You're not willing to pay the price at all. So here John is telling us, here the author of this gospel is speaking through the historical person of Jesus, reminding us that this enlightenment, this attaining of this level of God consciousness cannot be had from man or woman, but only from God. It's beautiful. You've been looking to other people to provide you with that which you can only get by coming into touch with this God. Now you've been looking for other people to solve all your problems, to give you all the answers, and you get angry when they don't. You are looking for them to stand in relationship to you like this God. Yeah, you can go deep into your own recesses of your being and there come in contact with an infallible source of advice. But you don't want to work that hard. That will cause you to compromise somewhere. So you want to find out some man or woman now to become your God of knowledge. Please tell me what to do. You get on the phone and worry that good sister 3-4 hours. Here's my problem. He did this. He did that. I don't know what should I. It's worrying people to death. Just a nuisance. Because you don't want to go in to that place inside yourself where God is and has all the answers that you will ever need to know. Everything. And it's available to you. But you don't want to do what is necessary for you. Security. Now you're looking for somebody else to generate your experience of security. You see? Some other human being or the state or the government, somebody do something to generate in me the experience of security. Because you're too lazy. You're too in love with that dark side of yourself to relinquish and move into the light that is embedded in your own being. And come in contact with that power that will never leave you to the end of time. That will prefer for you perfect security. It's worth it. We're like that cook who don't want to work. Finally, he says, and the Word became flesh and dwelt among us, and we beheld his glory. Glory is the only begotten Son from the Father, full of grace, full of truth. In some sense, we can only say that men like Jesus, or Buddha, or Kajali, or Krishna, Moses, Ezekiel, we can only say that it is only people like this who have a right to say that they were made in God's image, that they are truly sons of God. It is almost wrong for us to make that statement. In some sense, I can understand the writer of the gospel allocating to Jesus and people like Jesus, the status as being the only Son of God. It could almost have said, these are the only human beings on the planet. That is another way of saying it. Because you and I, you're not no human being. Yet. It's a possibility, yes. Yes. If you work very hard, yes, you too can become a human being. But that individual who goes through that process is so rare. It almost makes sense that this Jesus, or these Buddhas have been referred to. These are the only human beings. These are the only people made in God's image. The only one. Meaning that look at the rest of us. We are made in the image of our sensuality. We're made in the image of our mind. We're made in the image of our habits. We're made in the image of our likes and dislikes. We're made in the image of our condition. Your life is nothing but a reflection of your condition. Your thirst. And with God, we try to shut down God inside of us as much as possible. As much as possible. We want to remain as unawares as possible. We can only take so much satsang. Because the satsang, if we keep too much, it keeps us too aware. I mean, I better cut out some of this satsang here because, I'm getting too aware. This is messing me up. I got some days coming up. I got to shut down this awareness for a moment. So I go out on that date. Have that little sex. You understand? We have to shut it down. You see? We have to shut it down. And in that process of shutting down our God awareness, you also shut down being a human being. All right, shall we take our break and then we'll resume? Or a few questions?
We don't have much time.
30. We'll push it. We'll push it.
Okay, we'll take the break.
Yes, let's come back at 3:30.
Anybody want to give a love? And out of that came, did you say a will to come into being? Okay. Then I want to know if this is connected with like the workshops you've been given, and is this where ego is? Is this a good part of ego? Because what arises to make that want to come into being, okay? And when you said the word is a process, is that evolution? I mean, is that a tie-in here?
These are big questions.
And also, there was not anything made that's not by the word. Everything was made by that. Is that greed? Is that the good of greed?
The positive side of greed.
Yeah.
I want to know, these are concepts of ego.
Well, first thing we have to acknowledge is that all of these passions that we talk about have positive sides. So that's first thing we should.
We don't talk about that.
Well, we should very often. In fact, in somewhere in Ephesians 4:26, Paul writes that be ye angry, but do not sin. Even these people have an understanding that there is something called righteous indignation. But the question that you are putting has to be answered a long way ahead of these other questions. When you say ego, it's hard to say that because there was nothing to have in ego.
Well, what?
As such. There's nothing that can be said about it. Now, the truth of the matter is that there is no answer to that. That is mysterium. There is no way to know that other than to undergo the process of going back into a state of nothingness. When you are able to go deep into your meditation, when you are able to drop all of these layers of your being and then have that experience of nirvana, of nothingness, of the shunya, you see. And then, and only then, would you be able to really understand what that was all about. But there is nothing that can be said about that. Nobody knows, there's no answer that you can give to that. That is part of the mysterium. People ask all the time then, why did this creation come into being in the first place? Arvil has talked earlier today about the best answer that the mystics have been able to come. It just came into being out of love. Somewhere, if you remember, she mentioned the fact that it is just love that binds everything together. It makes up everything. It is ubiquitously distributed throughout the creation. So it says that whatever this thing was that we are calling God or pre-God, a desire, a will, an impulse arose in it to experience itself. There was nothing to experience. So the best answer, the closest answer has been that this creation came into being as a way of God experiencing itself. There was no way for God to experience itself. So it created a world, an illusion, a cinema, a lila, a game. Many names have been used in order to generate the experience of itself.
I got another question.
Okay, this is our turn. Go ahead, Al.
Okay. Here goes. This is a question.
Yes.
You said also that many times people say that we are made in the likeness of God. And then you ask, probably rhetorically, what is the we have that God has? What is it?
Go ahead.
Compassion.
What is that? When we declare ourselves as God-like, what is it that we have that is God-like? We know it's Papa the Nomo. If everything is made with the word, then we know we have that. When we speak that, we have power. And when you speak things, you bring it into being.
Yes.
It's almost like we're magical.
Yes.
You know, when you really go deep,
Yeah.
when you speak something and then it comes, that's magical.
Yes.
But what is it that we have? What is the essence? What are you really asking?
Consciousness.
Consciousness.
That very thing that is even asked in the question.
Okay.
That is the way to make it. Tadaji. Obvious shot. She don't feel like answering the question.
You read in the Bible that
Is this for me or is this?
well,
It's a statement.
It's a statement that in the beginning was the Word. And the Word was God. The Word was made flesh and dealt among men. That we may know Him not, right? That's something that all the masters and teachers go through. When they come into this world, they have to have a God's Word. If we don't welcome them, we basically crucify most of them. We don't accept their teaching nor follow them. So that goes down in history. And that's today too, though.
Of course. That's why I said that Jesus is more like an archetype. Actually, Jesus is an archetype of the traditional experience that most mystics confront. And you're absolutely right that when any human being attain that level of God consciousness, now they create a problem because their presence will not permit your unawareness. Their light
somehow disperses your darkness. Hence, they make us very uncomfortable because we would like to remain unconscious. We would like to remain unawares, you see. And just their very presence, you see, for those who are not genuine seekers becomes a problem, a great problem. Now, Jesus became a great problem for his contemporary rabbis, the Pharisees, Sadducees, etc. Because just his presence, they were making a fortune off of convincing the people that the kingdom of God was still yet to come, some faraway distant time and place. You see? And Jesus is coming and talking about, no, the kingdom of God is here now, it's available, enter into it, it's inside of you, it's not outside of you. Even more so, Jesus even destroyed the sacredness of the temple. The Samaritan lady at the well was talking about, you know, how you have to go to the temple to worship. And Jesus said, this is nonsense. You need not go to any temple to worship. So he was speaking even against the temple, you know, the Holy of Holies, as they call it, saying that this is not necessary. So that kind of light shining into that kind of darkness, you see, was bound to result in a great conflict. And those who had been not only making a living, but living fully in their own darkness and their own physicality, those who was wedded to their own sensuality, was very threatened by that. And how have we responded? We have slaughtered them. We have crucified them. We have killed them. Anything to shut their mouth, you see, and keep them from talking about things that are making us very uncomfortable. Jesus says somewhere, but those who are the lover of truth, you see. Now their response to the mystics have been very different. So we mustn't paint a lopsided picture. There's always been those souls that are truly thirsty, that have always responded. There haven't been many in numbers, true, but they have always been there. And actually it's for those souls that these masters really come in the first place, you see. And they have always responded. And they have always taken advantage and continue to bring this light down through time. It is very interesting that the Gnostic mystics, contemporary mystics during the time of Jesus, they really looked upon those people who were simply following the outer peripheral part of Christianity. They really looked down on them with some degree of contempt, in the sense that they were saying that these people, they don't even know what they're doing. You know, they're just ignorant, fundamentally. You see, they're caught up into some kind of imaginary kind of world, etc., etc. And they divided people, therefore, into three categories, what they call the helic, the psyche, and the pneuma. And the pneuma are those people who possess consciousness. Spirit is a word that is very often used symbolically to represent the presence of consciousness, right, in an individual. And so the saying was that only the pneumas really were able to benefit from Jesus' presence, basically, you know. So there's always been these pneumas, right, these marked souls, these souls who are ready, and they respond to the teachings. Not just in word, not just giving a sympathetic ear, because Siddhartha, we want to make a distinction. Most of us will, almost all of us will agree intellectually and philosophically, with the teachings. That's not a problem. Problem is bringing our life into harmony with that. Now, that's the real mark of whether you are sympathetic toward a guru or a master. It's the extent that you bring your life into a life. The other stuff is just on the lips, you see. Somewhere in the Gospels, remember, you will read where Jesus is said to have said that all those who say, Lord, Lord, shall not be saved, but only he who does what I'm teaching you to do. Right? Meaning that simply because we nod our head, yes, Krishna, you're right, yes, Buddha, that's right, oh, Jesus, that's beautiful, ooh, wow, I really appreciate you, that means nothing. It's how you live, you see? It's how you live. Right, Albert? So that's the final word. Yes, brother?
Yes, Bhagwan, you were mentioning about this, when we identify with God, with Christ in our life. In my Christian background, I learned that was what's called blasphemy. So how can a person get within himself, even with that thought that it's blasphemy to do that?
Yes, there's a school of Christianity, you see, the priestly school, that wants to keep us forever incapable of attaining the level of Christ consciousness because their business depends upon your being unable to do that. You need them. And the other one that speak about it is being blasphemous and so on and so forth. But you have to understand that there were many other schools of Christianity that never held that to be blasphemous. In fact, they held that to be the goal of being initiated into the Christian mysteries. In fact, the whole purpose of the initiation into the Christian mysteries was to become Christ-like, was to become born again, was to be so radically transformed that the personality that you are now cease to exist and is replaced by Christ that is in you. That was his whole goal and objective. So it depends, you see, which school of Christianity you were victimized by. And this is a problem, all over the Christian world, even until this day. That there's something almost blasphemous about your talking about becoming a Christ. Yet this is the very purpose of being initiated into the Christian mystery. Correct?
You mentioned earlier in the lecture about the question of divinity. Is this the same question that exists today? The reason why the Western Christianity does not associate, does not come together with Eastern Orthodox Christianity?
There still are splits in the church regarding the status of Jesus, what they call Christology. Christology are the theories that have been put forward regarding the status of Jesus. Now, in some Christology, they hold that Jesus was just a human being, period. That there was nothing divine about him as such. He was simply a very morally and developed highly moral and righteous, etc. And that was the school of Christianity. And they said that because of his highly moral development, he later became adopted by God during the baptism, right? To function as a conduit to introduce the process to other people who could achieve the same degree of moral development. And that by the time he reached the cross, that God, Christ, because remember, Christ is thought in that term to be separate from Jesus, that these are two different phenomena. Jesus is a human phenomenon. Christ is a divine phenomenon. So that Christ that was indwelt in Jesus left Jesus as he hung on the cross. Hence Jesus' word, why have thou forsaken me? Even prior to that, when the crowd had come to arrest him, you see, after he came back from prayer, you see, at prayer he was asking, please let this cup pass from me, you see, etc., etc., etc. It is said by some that even at that early point, the Christ had already been sent. You see? So there's many different ways of looking at that. Now that school still sometimes is practicing their own approach towards Christianity even to this day. So all of it did not get stamped out. It became a problem for the Orthodox views on Christianity, Bhagwan, because part of the whole process of Jesus dying for the redemption of your sin lies in the fact that he suffered, right, as a human being, right? But that he also was God, right? Because they needed to have that, him dying as Christ on the cross. Otherwise, how could he, it makes no sense about redemption and salvation. It has all become nonsensical. So it was very important that he was Christ on that cross. So you can see how these early adoptionists became a sore point in the sides of those who wanted to put forth a different theory on the deity of Jesus. So they needed Jesus to be Christ. Not only Christ on the cross, but Christ even coming out of Mary's womb. That was very necessary, you see, for him to be portrayed as such. So there was a lot of things going on there. So these adoptionists and separatists, had their own impact on the formation of Christology. And Christology, of course, shaped the rest of Christian dogma and things of that nature. So it's a lot of different things going on with that whole thing. Yes, ma'am.
I came a little late, but did I hear correctly? You're saying that John initiated Jesus?
According to the scriptures, you see, John the Baptist initiated Jesus into the mysteries. Now, there have been different schools some schools, for instance, have tried to minimize that because we know that John the Baptist was baptizing people to wash away their sin, meaning this unconsciousness that results in errors living. But in order for Jesus to go and get initiated, it would mean that he would have to have had some sin. And if he had some sin, then you see, this becomes a problem for establishing his divinity from inception. In fact, before inception. Because, again, John speaks on the having existed before the world, etc., etc. You have to understand that Jesus was looked upon as being God, not